My mind just went completely blank. Hello and welcome to All Comics Considered, the comic book podcast with a heart of gold. As 2019 winds down to a close, Tim and I will be talking tonight about some of our favorite goings-on in the comic book multiverse. Tim, so I have not watched, unfortunately, the thing I was actually pretty excited about this year, yet the crossover event from the CW, Crisis on Infinite Earths. So I suspect that might have been one of my favorites had I watched it yet. I was wondering what are some of the things that you've really appreciated in 2019?
When it comes to all nerd things considered, there are three things that I have on tap. For my viewing pleasure, I've also not seen Crisis because I'm not a very good DC nerd, but I will definitely get to it. All my attention has gone to the Mandalorian.
You and everybody else.
Me and everyone else. I've got plenty of friends who are saying to me, "Oh, but you should also look at The Expanse," and I have not done it.
Different show.
Different
show. And don't let anybody tell you that they're the same. They're very, very different.
I saw a couple of the first episodes of the first season of The Expanse, and to me, it was just this grim, dark, bleak, unfun show, and I just bailed after 2 episodes because everyone dies in episode 1 is not a way to reel me in.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. That's a fair assessment. The show is really about the survivors of that particular crew, and at least the first season is first book is about the political ramifications that incident has throughout the solar system. But I can understand feeling like that, getting off on the wrong foot there.
Well, and the other part is that we're already in late stage capitalism, so I don't need to see it in space.
Yep. It's more than just capitalism. It's cultural divisions. It's racism. It's a meditation on various types of bigotry.
Yeah, I lived through it. I don't have to have it in my fantasy and sci-fi.
Yep, I definitely can understand that too.
Yeah, and if I am going to have bigotry in my sci-fi and fantasy, it's going to be in the X-Men.
So the X-Men had a pretty big year this year.
That's right. That was one of the 2 comic books I wanted to talk about as far as what I consider the best of 2019. Jonathan Hickman is probably you could call him a creative genius and not be inaccurate in any way. And his X-Men run this year really completely reimagined the X-Men. Even in the book, they were sort of joking about how everything felt like they've been through it before, and they've been through the persecution thing before. They've been through On the Run. They've been through a hated minority. And the trope has been worn thin. And Hickman said, "Okay, let's just reimagine this whole thing," and he pulled it off. He created an X-Men title, an X-Men run that completely reimagined how mutants are in the world, and it's compelling. The artwork on it was also very, very good. And I haven't liked the X-Men this much since the 80s, really. So I think it did a phenomenal job, and I'm all in with his X-Men franchise relaunch. I don't know anyone that could have pulled it off any better than he.
What I find interesting about that is that, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, X-Men has been pretty samey for a long time. There's only so many times you can tell the same story about oppression before. I mean, really, there's only so many times you can tell the same story, period, before it starts to get tired, And we can repackage it and put it into different formats. But when you are trapped inside a single comic book with a limited cast of characters, despite how huge the cast of characters of X-Men, the X-Men universe is. Like, it's still a limited cast of characters. It's only so many times you can tell that story. What I find interesting about the new X books, though, is that they're presenting a situation in which the oppressed win, and that is incredibly rare. Like, we have two types of fiction about oppression. There is the act of being oppressed, which is the standard X-Men kind of trope, where you are trapped underneath the ever-present thumb of the hegemony. And then you have far future stuff like Star Trek, where like, yay, we defeated racism and bigotry centuries ago, yay. We never actually get to like see that. We never get to see the transition of a society from one of hatred to one of peace. And the new X books are kind of presenting that era, right? Like, even the books about people escaping oppression always end immediately after they escape oppression, right? Like, hell, man, Star Wars, right? Like, Luke convinces Vader to throw the Emperor down a shaft. Yay! Everything's good now. Like, as if there are no other racists in the galaxy, right? So it's
or powers that just want to oppress everyone and blow up.
Yeah. I mean, so it's interesting to me that that's a largely unexplored territory in the West, writing about a transition of a society from conservative to progressive.
Well, what's also, that is true. I agree with you. What I have noticed in comic books is that whenever superheroes, quote unquote, or people with powers try to create a utopia, it's always a terrible lesson that's in the wings. Right?
Yeah,
so these attempts always become corrupt.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, the message of those things is always, don't try to change; you'll just make things worse. And like, what an awful message to give people.
Right. It's always that absolute power corrupts absolutely, which I believe is true. But I don't think the X-Men are an absolute power. They are a power.
Yeah, man. Like, like, step one in creating a utopia is preventing anyone from gaining absolute power, right? Like, it's got to be a collaborative exercise.
We'll see if they follow that pathway and try to, destroy Krakoa and all that stuff, and see if there's another fall of the X-Men. But right now, I'm rating high. It's good. Not everything's pat. There's mystery. There's intrigue. There's some backstabbing. It wouldn't be the X-Men without it. But yeah, so far of 2019, that is one of my two favorite storylines.
I mean, Apocalypse is running around on the island, right? Like,
right. Yeah. And for some reason, Krakoa doesn't care for Kitty. What? We're still figuring that out, I guess.
Something to do with her time and space, probably.
Probably. Do you want to go next?
No, I want to hear your third choice here.
Right. So Mandalorian, X-Men, and my third one. I still can't get enough of this. I'm still not tired of it, and it's nothing less than the Hulk series. And the reason, I guess what I really need anymore are books that break the mold, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what the X-Men has done. And the Immortal Hulk is doing the same thing. They're telling a story of horror instead of hero Hulk, or Hulk that has just an identity crisis all the time. Don't get me wrong, there's identity crisis all the time in Immortal Hulk, but they're now they're definitely in the horror realm versus the tortured hero or anti-hero realm. And it is a deep dive into what happens when your self is conflicted and also your Hulk. And it's gross. There's like gross parts of this, like heads explode, chest gets caved in, there's blood and guts everywhere.
Yeah, there's definitely a decent amount of body horror in there.
Right, this is like an EC horror comic from the 70s, but the Hulk. and I can't get enough. It's
That
fascinating that they're pulling this off.
that is really what it reminds me of. Is like Creep Show or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just I'm so astounded that this is the Hulk we have now. And interestingly, the Hulk that is in the world that does the hero stuff is Jennifer,
Yep.
and she is more like regular Hulk because she's kind of got that sort of bestial Hulk mind when she hulks out now. So she's fully stepped into that role.
Yeah, they've been pushing that storyline with her again. It's actually like something they kind of had slacked off on with her for a long time and given her other stories to tell other than getting angry and hulking out. But it's kind of nice seeing her return to those roots again.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer a smart, funny She-Hulk that quips all the time, but that's not where we're at right now.
Yeah,
Okay.
unfortunately, not everything can be the Charles Soule run.
So those are my three things. I briefly touched on Mandalorian. It's briefly comics adjacent, and it's just a fun show. And it's the cutest sci-fi show in the world.
So I have a question for you.
Hmm.
About the Mandalorian specifically.
Sure.
So the main criticism that I've been seeing is there's like a small but not insignificant chunk of people that don't want to watch it because they think it's sexist.
I've not detected that.
So the main drive in that it is sexist is the extremely limited amount of screen time women get in the show.
Yeah, well, the show's about the Mandalorian, who happens to be a dude. So
yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about this one. I'll say the vast majority of the women that I know really, really like it. I suspect that a decent chunk of people were swayed when Gina Carano came onto the show.
Gina Carano was freaking amazing.
Yep, she's super great, super duper great.
And she's the kind of person where you go, oh yeah, this lady here is complete badass, and she could take me 5 out of 8 matches, easy.
Oh yeah. She's more badass than the Mandalorian.
Yeah. Well, she's at least on par.
Yeah.
I mean, they spar, they duke it out, and they're matched. But she definitely looks burlier than he does.
I'm happy for her, man. I think this is a role that really suited her. She was fun in Deadpool, but that wasn't really like a big role, to be honest. Like, she's one of the main bad guys in Deadpool, and it still wasn't a very big role. I thought she really rocked it, though, in Mandalorian.
Yeah, I don't understand the criticism. If the story centers around a character and what they are going through, and the character is male gendered, the criticism of there's not enough women doesn't seem to be a valid one. And also, I don't believe it because there are plenty of women in the show, and they're all more or less badass.
I don't know. I feel weird even weighing in on discussions like this, to be honest.
That being said, Ming-Na Wen's assassin character should have gotten a lot more licks in.
Way more screen time, too.
Yeah, that was weak, but all right. So it's not perfect writing, but it's, I don't know. I don't see the. If I wish we had Caitlin on or Hannah or someone to counterbalance that, but I can't really see it. I don't see it as a justifiable
That's fair
viewpoint. And my broveries are exploding about the child. So
they have in fact crafted the most perfectly adorable creature, man. Oh god, it actually reminds me of. Oh man, there's some show about where I think it might have been a kid's show about the ultimate cuteness or something like that. Oh man, now I can't remember what it was. I thought it was Futurama for a second, but I think it might actually be Phineas and Ferb.
I can say that the last episode, I'm not completely caught up. I'm on 6. I finished 6. We see Baby Yoda like a little bit in the melee, and he gets tossed around. I actually audibly gasped when he landed on the ground, a little hard.
It is Phineas and Ferb, where they discover the substance Cutonium on an alien planet, and an alien attempts to use it to become the cutest creature in the universe and therefore take over the universe. It's Baby Yoda right there.
There you go.
So my year has mostly been about watching things.
Mm-hmm.
I've read a few comics. I was going to mention the Hulk, but you already beat me to it.
Oh.
But this was a big year for the MCU. We had 3 MCU movies come out this year, and they were all pretty significant. The year started off with Captain Marvel, which I thought was great. Then rolled smoothly into Endgame, which of course, seals up the first arc of the entirety of the MCU. And then we got Spider-Man: Far From Home, which was a kick-ass movie. That was just very, very solid. We also had, on the DC side, the Joker, which is making, I don't know how many scads of shekels out there right now.
It definitely hit $1 billion in revenue.
Yeah, it was huge, just huge. For me, though, the thing that's really kind of topped it is Watchmen, HBO's Watchmen. Boy, what a surprising show. I was very, very prepared for that to just be utter garbage. And instead, it is one of the most socially challenging and kind of exciting spins on its source material out there right now.
So when I watched the first episode with my wife, listener, she's white, and she did not know about Black Wall Street, and she did not know about the massacre in Tulsa.
Yeah, man, we dropped bombs on our own freaking city.
Yeah, and
I mean, so that's insane. If you listeners, if you are unfamiliar with this, or if your only exposure to it through Watchmen, if your only exposure to it is through Watchmen, please go do a little bit of research on this. It is an ungodly messed up thing.
And it actually happened. And it happened probably largely how it was portrayed on screen.
Yeah.
Literally bombs. So that was a real thing. And so I guess I was a little bit, since I tread water in the social justice world, I knew about it. I had studied it. And it was it was hard to watch on screen, but it was important to see.
Yeah, it was very powerful. That first episode was wonky, right? Because they kind of presented it as this is going to be a show about superhero cops fighting racists, like fighting the Ku Klux Klan. And I don't know, man. Anybody with outsider knowledge, I'm going to say, of the Ku Klux Klan knows that that isn't how that goes down, right? I mean,
no.
The FBI has been warning us about white supremacists specifically infiltrating law enforcement for like 30 or 40 years.
This is true.
And then we get a big reveal in the second episode, basically saying, that isn't how this goes down. It is I don't want to say too much because you haven't seen it, but it's a powerful show. And it's a powerful show that talks honestly and openly about some very serious things that we grapple with in the United States. The concept of race and power. Who has the power? What are they going to do with it? How are people terrified when people of other races get power? It's I don't know. Watch it. That's all I can really say. Watch it.
I'm on episode 1. I've got HBO Go. I'll finish it up this month.
Alan Moore is just notoriously sort of grumpy about anything to do with properties that he started or had a hand in, being used for other purposes. And I can understand that, right? He has not been well treated by the comic book industry in a lot of ways. But it's a worthy successor, man. Like Watchmen is an important book. Like it is an important comic book. Reading it helps improve your own understanding of superheroes and gives you that perspective of like, wow, man, the stuff that's going on in these books is actually pretty messed up. I probably wouldn't have really sort of come to my belief that, Charles Xavier is a villain without reading Watchmen.
Well, if you think about superheroes in our world, in our real world, and we have had people like that, Phoenix Jones being one in Seattle, there's some pretty mixed feelings. Like, oh, he's definitely outside the law. He's definitely not accountable to anyone.
Yep.
He definitely may be using methods that I don't agree with. And why are we allowing? We're supposed to be a nation of laws. Why are we allowing this? This seems really bad.
Yep. Vigilantism is bad, man. It's just it's bad news.
What else you have on deck? You've got Watchmen, fantastic. I totally agree. Can't wait to dig into more. I know it's not Squirrel Girl.
Yeah, it is not Squirrel Girl, unfortunately. I wish that it was, but it is not. Man, I was unfortunately I spent a lot of time this year reading comics from that I'd purchased in previous years. I just had a huge backlog on my shelf that I was trying to get through. Spider-Man: Far From Home was, I mean, that was a great movie, right? We actually really didn't talk about it on the show all that much, but it was a worthy follow-up to Homecoming. I don't know, man. Like, so Homecoming, the villainy there was about like people that are getting the short end of the stick economically, and how that kind of can drive you to insanity and bad action. Whereas Far From Home was definitely about fake news, right? It's about crafting illusions and just filling the air with so much nonsense that you can't separate the truth from reality. So I'm pretty excited to see where they're going to go with the third one. Now that we're sure that they are going to get a third one.
You know what? That just, when you said that it's about fake news, in turn, it made me think about what happens when people that you disregard or shit on become resentful and gain power. You know, like the Trump people.
Sure.
Like the deplorables.
Like the thing that motivates that crew of people is the terror that, you know, the groups of people that they've been shitting on for centuries are going to gain power, right? And treat them the same way.
The way I interpreted all of it was more facile, which is Tony Stark shit on these people, and they're finally going to have their day in the sun.
I mean, Tony Stark did shit on those people.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, as much as it is about fake news and, you know, the manipulation that can come from that, it is also, if you shit on people and act superior and act like a dick, there will be a comeuppance. Probably.
There will.
Eventually.
And that comeuppance will probably make the world worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, on this cheery episode of All Comics Considered, honestly, I think that 2019 was a pretty good year for comics. Starting with 2016, there's kind of a, regression in comics. When Secret Empire, you know, started to get kicked off, and all of the other old heroes started coming back, and the new ones that we were excited about got pushed to the side. 2019 turned some of that around in a lot of ways. We got to see some exciting things. We got to see some new stuff, you know, just really fresh stories. So I think overall, I'm pretty happy with the year in terms of comic book creativity. How about you?
I am also happy. Yeah, I think it got a little. The pushback was unfortunate, and I felt kind of burnt out about it. But we're seeing some good stuff happening. Ta-Nehisi Coates cut his teeth writing Black Panther.
Yeah,
and I thought it was pretty I thought it was kind of clunky, frankly. But he took the reins on Captain America, and I think he's hit his stride there.
I mean,
so I would call that a nice. If not my first two, maybe my third favorite.
I mean, the transition from writing prose to writing scripts has got to be insanely difficult. I know I find it difficult.
Yeah.
It's hard to streamline writing and make it good. Like, it's very difficult.
I mean, writing comics is its own specific art form. It's its own specific milieu. You can't just go, oh, I'm a writer, I'm going to do this. It's not that easy. So that was Nick and Tim doing best of, or our favorites of 2019. Whenever we do a Nick and Tim show, I like to call it Tick, which was also a decent show on Amazon. And its loss is too bad. As usual, we want to give a big old shout out to our music and sound editing guru, the beautiful and talented Steve Jacoby. If you had a good time hearing about the end of 2019, what we liked, and if you learned a thing or two, please share us with a friend and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. Our review on the Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, or radio.com goes a long way towards our visibility. If you want to do a little more than that, we're over at Patreon as All Comics Considered. Every dollar you give us goes towards building our amazing community and keeps us afloat. If we've made a mistake and you want to let us know about it, you can definitely email us at lockjaw@allcomicsconsidered. Today, your hosts have been me, producer Tim. You can find me on Twitter at TimConsiders and manning our Facebook page at All Comics Considered.
I'm legally Nick Fury.
You don't find Nick Fury, he finds you.
Until next time, Action Heroes, keep your eyes turned towards 2020.